there were, and this is I'm simply stating a fact, there were migrant rape gangs in England that would run around and prey on young girls, gang rape them, and some people found that objectionable, which obviously it should be objectionable, and they were upset about that, and so they complained about it online and were sent to prison. That sounds crazy.
Elon Musk drawing attention to the historic and horrific child sexual abuse scandal in the UK. He was soon joined by JK Rowling, the British novelist best known for her Harry Potter fantasy series. British MPs joined the chorus too, all demanding accountability after hundreds of children were sexually abused in the UK. So why did the uproar start? It started after UK's Safeguarding Minister Jess Phillips formally denied requests for the Home Office to lead a public inquiry into child sexual exploitation in Oldham. She said it is for the Oldham Council alone to decide to commission an inquiry locally rather than for the government to intervene, just like the towns of Rotherham and Telford commissioned their own inquiry. Musk directly challenged Jess Phillips and Prime Minister Keir Starmer. She deserves to be in jail, Musk said for Phillips. On Keir Starmer, he said, who was the head of the Crown Prosecution Service when rape gangs were allowed to exploit young girls without facing justice. Keir Starmer, 2008 to 2013. He added, in the UK, serious crimes such as rape require the Crown Prosecution Service's approval for the police to charge suspects. As Musk called for King Charles to dissolve Parliament and order a general election over the charges, he found support from a whistleblower who had resigned from Greater Manchester Police in 2012. Maggie Oliver said Keir Starmer was as guilty as anyone else. But the UK government is pushing back against the criticism.
Those that are spreading lies and misinformation as far and as wide as possible, they're not interested in victims. They're interested in themselves.
So what exactly is the scandal? A national inquiry by Professor Alexis J looked into abuse by organized groups after many sexual offenders who targeted children were convicted across the UK between 2010 and 2014, including in Rotherham, Cornwall, Derbyshire, Rochdale and Bristol. The inquiry concluded in 2022 with 20 recommendations. Professor J had previously led a landmark local inquiry into widespread abuse in Rotherham, which found that at least 1,400 minors were systematically abused over 16 years in Rotherham alone. This happened from 1997 to 2013. Most of the victims were young girls. They were targeted, manipulated and trafficked. They suffered abuse so appalling it defies comprehension. Victims faced extreme forms of abuse. They were raped by multiple perpetrators, trafficked and intimidated. Accounts of abuse suffered are chilling. Children were doused in petrol and threatened with immolation. They were forced to witness violent rapes and subjected to threats involving guns. Many victims lived in constant fear as their abusers used physical violence and psychological coercion to control and silence them. For some, the abuse started when they were as young as 11 years. And who were the abusers? Organized groups of men, most of them were of British Pakistani origin. While their crimes were heinous, the abuse they perpetrated went unchecked. There was mounting evidence, but early warnings from professionals on the ground were either ignored or dismissed by senior officials. There were institutional failures because of the reluctance of authorities to address the ethnic background of the abusers. Authorities downplayed their Pakistani heritage as they feared being labelled racist, so they wouldn't call a spade a spade. This fear led to widespread inaction. Exploitation continued unchecked and perpetrators were emboldened. Impact on victims was devastating and long-lasting. Severe physical and emotional trauma, relationships with families breaking down, hostility and disbelief from communities, and a feeling that their suffering was second to political sensitivities. In November last year, Professor J said she felt frustrated that none of the probe's 20 recommendations had been implemented more than 2 years after its conclusion. What's worse, the institutional failure extended to the media industry too. This is an article by journalist Julie Bindul. She covered the scandal and the cover-up too. It was published in 2017, but her first investigative story was written way back in 2006. No one listened to her back then. Not the newspaper editors, because they too were afraid of being branded racist. So newspaper editors looked away, but could not for too long. In 2011, Andrew Norfolk wrote his first story on the scandal for The Times, and then he did a series of investigative stories. He identified a pattern of Pakistani heritage grooming gangs exploiting white girls in the north of England and the Midlands in 2010. Victims were arrested. Yes, you heard it right. Norfolk says a 12-year-old girl was found drunk and half-naked with a group of Asian men, but the police arrested the girl for being drunk and disorderly. Victims were so badly let down. The police was not only insensitive and incompetent, but also corrupt. See this post based on the account of a survivor. When victims went to the police, in some cases, the perpetrators mysteriously seemed to know. This case is one of the most harrowing examples of systemic failure in safeguarding vulnerable children in the UK. And while outrage has been reignited over the scandal in the UK and beyond, another story is playing out simultaneously. Elon Musk has been calling to free Tommy Robinson. Stephen Yaxley Lennon, better known as Tommy Robinson, is a British journalist and activist. He has long been a vocal critic of the rape gangs. He is currently serving an 18-month prison term in a contempt of court case. Musk is throwing his weight behind him for trying to blow the whistle on the scandal. A documentary by Robinson had detailed the extent of the abuse. Robinson's official handle shared a story of a victim allegedly raped and pimped out at the age of 11. Musk's support for Robinson has even led to a storm in a teacup in UK politics. Reform UK party leader Nigel Farage, otherwise a Musk supporter, has distanced himself from Musk's take on Robinson. Now Musk says Reform UK needs a new leader and Farage does not have what it takes. For Tommy Robinson per se, there is growing support on social media.
You could be the silenced one in the end, the silenced victim that nobody talks about. It takes a lot of courage to be truthful, but now you have been given the weapon of free speech. Are you brave enough to use it? I stand with Tommy Robinson. Free Tommy Robinson.
So in this saga of child sexual abuse, where does the problem lie? Well, the simple answer is the problem lies at multiple levels. Those tasked with protecting the most vulnerable in society were incompetent and even complicit with the abusers. The criminal justice system failed all victims. While arrests and convictions happened, many abusers walked away free, and there continue to be glaring gaps in fixing accountability of all those who failed hundreds of girls. Just to remind you, victims and their relatives were arrested in many cases after they flagged the abuse and not the abusers. Now, UK's Health Secretary says the government was getting on with the job of implementing Professor J's recommendations in full. But that's too little, too late. That's all in this edition of Connecting the Dots. We'll see you next week with more raging issues. Until then, it's a goodbye from all of us here in the Delhi newsroom. This is Munmun Bhattacharya signing off. Take care and stay safe.